Elena smoothed her emerald green dress with trembling hands. The silk fabric felt cold against her skin despite the warm summer air. She could hear the crowd gathering in the great courtyard beyond the palace walls. Their excited voices carried on the wind like music. Children laughed and called out her name. Mothers held babies high to catch a glimpse of their beloved princess, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. Alexander had been distant for weeks. His warm brown eyes that once sparkled. When he looked at her now, it seemed clouded with worry. He barely spoke during their evening walks through the rose garden. When she asked what troubled him, he would force a smile and say everything was perfect. But Elena knew better. She had loved him since they were children, playing in these very halls. The palace doors opened with a heavy creak. Lord Hampton, the royal advisor, bowed deeply as she entered. His usually cheerful face looked pale and strained. Behind him stood the other council members, all wearing expressions that made Elena's stomach twist with fear. "Your Highness," Lord Hampton said softly, "Prince Alexander is waiting for you in the throne room." Elena nodded and walked through the familiar corridors. Her footsteps echoed off the marble floors like whispers of doom. The portraits of past kings and queens seemed to watch her with knowing eyes. She passed the library where she and Alexander had shared their first kiss. On her 18th birthday, she passed the music room where he had sung to her just last month, promising they would make beautiful music together for the rest of their lives. The throne room doors were already open. Alexander stood at the far end near the massive windows that overlooked the kingdom. His broad shoulders were tense beneath his royal blue jacket. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but she could see his hands shaking at his sides. "Alexander," she called softly. He turned slowly. The pain in his eyes hit her like a physical blow. This was not the face of a man about to announce his engagement. This was the face of a man about to break someone's heart. "Elena," he whispered, "please sit down." She moved to the ornate chair beside the throne where she had imagined sitting as his queen. The golden cushions felt hard and cold beneath her. Alexander remained standing, unable to meet her gaze directly. "The people are gathering," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're so excited about our announcement." Alexander closed his eyes as if her words caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, tears had formed along his lashes. "There will be no announcement today," he said quietly. The words hit Elena like ice water. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What do you mean? I cannot marry you, Elena. I'm sorry, I'm so very sorry." The throne room began to spin around her. She felt like she was falling, even though They remained seated. "I don't understand. Yesterday you said you loved me. You said we would rule this kingdom together." "I do love you," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "That's what makes this so impossible. Then why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Alexander turned back to the window. Outside, the crowd was growing larger. Banners with their names hung from every building. Children wore paper crowns and carried flowers to throw at their feet. The entire kingdom had prepared for a celebration. "My father received word this morning," Alexander said without turning round. "Princess Victoria of the Northern Kingdom arrives tomorrow. The father has threatened war if I do not marry her within the month." Elena felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "War? Their army is 3 times the size of ours. They control the mountain passes that bring us food during winter. If I refuse this marriage, our people will suffer. Children will starve. Families will lose their fathers and sons in battle." She stood on unsteady legs and moved toward him. "There must be another way we can negotiate. We can offer them something else." Alexander finally turned to face her. Tears were flowing freely down his cheeks now. "There is nothing else they want. Victoria has loved me since we were children, just as you have. Her father will accept nothing less than this marriage." "But you don't love her." "No," he said simply. "I love you. I will always love you. But I cannot let my personal happiness destroy the lives of thousands of innocent people." Elena reached out to touch his face, but he stepped back as if her touch would burn him. "Don't," he whispered. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." Through the windows they could hear the crowd beginning to chant their names. Alexander and Elena, Alexander and Elena. The sound that should have filled her with joy now felt like knives cutting through her soul. "What will you tell them?" she asked. "I will tell them the truth, that I must marry Princess Victoria to secure peace for our kingdom. I will tell them that sometimes love is not enough." Elena sank back into the chair. Her beautiful dress suddenly felt like a costume for a play that had been cancelled. All her dreams of being queen, of ruling beside the man she loved, of having children who would carry on their legacy, crumbled to dust in that moment. "Will you stay for the announcement?" Alexander asked. She looked up at him through her tears. Even now, heartbroken and devastated, he was still the most beautiful man she had ever seen. His kindness and sense of duty were part of what made her love him so deeply. But those same qualities were now tearing them apart. "I cannot," she said. "I cannot stand beside you and watch you promise yourself to another woman." Alexander nodded, understanding flooding his features. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Away from here. Somewhere I can learn to live without you." The sound of trumpets began to echo through the palace. It was time for Alexander to address his people. Time to break not just Elena's heart, but the hearts of everyone who had believed in their fairy tale love story. As Alexander walked toward the door that would lead him to the balcony, he stopped and looked back at her one last time. In another life, he said softly, we would have been so happy together. Elena watched him go, knowing it was the last time she would see the man she loved as anything more than a stranger who had once held her heart. The great balcony of the Golden Palace had never seen such a crowd. Thousands of people filled the courtyard below, their faces bright with excitement and hope. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders, waving small flags with the royal colors. Women wore their finest dresses, saved for special occasions. Men had polished their boots and combed their hair with extra care. Everyone had come to witness what they believed would be the most joyful announcement in the kingdom's history. Prince Alexander stood behind the heavy curtains that separated him from his people. His hands trembled as he adjusted his royal jacket. One final time, the golden buttons felt like weights pulling him down. His crown, usually a symbol of pride and honor, now felt like a burden too heavy to bear. Lord Hampton appeared at his side, his face grave with concern. Your Highness, the people are ready. They have been waiting for over an hour. Alexander nodded but did not move toward the balcony doors. Has Princess Elena left the palace? Yes, Your Highness. She departed through the servants' entrance tent. Minutes ago no one saw her leave. The prince closed his eyes, imagining Elena's tear-stained face as she slipped away from the only home she had ever known. She had grown up in this palace alongside him. They had shared every birthday, every holiday, every important moment of their lives. Now she was gone, and he might never see her again. And Princess Victoria? Alexander asked. Her carriage was spotted crossing the Eastern Bridge an hour ago. She will arrive before sunset. Alexander's stomach churned at the thought. Princess Victoria was beautiful and intelligent, but she was a stranger. He had met her only 3 times at formal gatherings. She seemed kind enough, but when he looked at her, he felt nothing. No spark of joy, no flutter of excitement, no warmth in his chest. She was simply another person in an elegant dress. The people are growing restless, Lord Hampton warned gently. Some are beginning to ask questions. Through the curtains, Alexander could hear the crowd's cheerful chatter slowly changing to confused murmurs. Someone called out, "Where is Princess Elena?" Another voice shouted, "We want to see our future queen." Each word felt like a dagger in Alexander's heart. These were his people, the men and women he had sworn to protect and serve. They trusted him completely. They believed he would bring them happiness and prosperity. Instead, he was about to crush their dreams just as his own had been crushed. Need a moment, Alexander said. He walked to the small chapel that connected to the throne room. The peaceful space had always been his refuge during difficult times. Candles flickered on the altar, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The smell of incense hung in the air like a prayer itself. Alexander knelt before the altar and bowed his head. "Give me strength," he whispered. "Help me find the right words to explain what cannot be explained." He thought about his father, the king, who lay ill in his bed 3 floors above. The old man had cried when he delivered the news about the forced marriage. He had held Alexander's hands and said, "My son, I am sorry. If there was any other way, I would find it." But they both knew the truth. The Northern Kingdom's army was already gathering at the border. Spies had reported seeing thousands of soldiers preparing for war. The chapel doors opened softly. Alexander looked up to see his younger sister, Princess Sophia, entering with tears in her eyes. At 16, she was still young enough to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. Her golden hair was braided with ribbons, and she wore a pink dress she had specially chosen for Elena's engagement announcement. "Brother," she said, sitting beside him on the cold stone floor. "Is it true? Must you really marry Princess Victoria?" Alexander put his arm around his sister's shoulders. "Yes, Sophia, I must, but you love Elena. Everyone knows you love Elena. Sometimes love is not enough." Alexander repeated the words he had said to Elena, but they felt hollow and meaningless. "Cannot our allies help us?" Sophia asked. "What about the Western Kingdom? They have always been our friends. Their army is smaller than ours. Combined, we still could not defeat the Northern Kingdom without losing thousands of lives." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been tearing at Alexander's soul. What if Elena's father had an army? What if she could bring soldiers to protect us? Alexander's heart clenched, but she cannot. Elena is an orphan. She has no kingdom, no army, no political power. She has only love to offer, and love cannot stop cannons or feed starving children. "It seems cruel," Sophia whispered, "that love should matter so little when it feels like everything." Before Alexander could respond, Lord Hampton appeared in the chapel doorway. "Your Highness, forgive the interruption, but the crowd is becoming concerned. Some people are leaving, others are demanding to know why the announcement has been delayed." Alexander stood and helped his sister to her feet. "I will go now." As they walked back toward the balcony, Sophia caught his arm. "Will you tell them about Elena? Will you explain that you loved her?" Alexander paused. He had been wondering the same thing. Would it be kinder to let the people believe this was always the plan? Or should he tell them the truth about his broken heart? "I will tell them what they need to know," he said finally. "Nothing more, nothing less." The balcony doors opened, and the roar of the crowd hit Alexander like a wave. Thousands of voices called out his name. Hands waved frantically, and the sea of faces below looked up at him with such hope and trust that he nearly turned and ran back inside. But he was a prince. He had duties that went beyond his personal happiness. Alexander stepped forward to the golden railing. The crowd slowly quieted, sensing that something important was about to happen. In the front row, he could see Mrs. Williams, the baker's wife, holding her newborn baby. Behind her stood Thomas the blacksmith with his 3 young sons. These were the people he had grown up with, the people who depended on him to make the right choices. "My beloved people," Alexander began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "I have called you here today to share news that will affect our entire kingdom." A cheer went up from the crowd. Someone shouted, "We love you, Prince Alexander." Another voice called, "Where is Princess Elena?" Alexander's throat tightened at the mention of Elena's name. He gripped the railing harder, feeling the cold metal bite into his palms. "For many years you have watched Princess Elena and me grow up together within these palace walls. You have seen our friendship blossom into something deeper. You have hoped, as I have hoped, that love alone could guide the future of our kingdom." The crowd murmured in confusion. This did not sound like the joyful announcement they had expected. "But a prince's duty is not to his own heart," Alexander continued. "A prince's duty is to his people, to ensure their safety, their prosperity, and their peace." The murmurs grew louder. Some people began to look worried. "Therefore I must announce that I will marry Princess Victoria of the Northern Kingdom within the month. This marriage will secure a lasting peace between our lands and protect all of you from the dangers of war." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd erupted in shocked voices, confused questions, and heartbroken cries. The marketplace outside the Golden Palace had never felt so cold to Elena. She pulled her simple brown cloak tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the crowd of confused people. Her emerald dress was hidden beneath the rough fabric, and her golden hair was tucked under a worn hood. No one recognized the heartbroken princess who moved like a ghost through their midst. Behind her, she could still hear the shocked voices rising from the palace courtyard. Alexander's announcement had sent waves of disbelief through the kingdom. People were crying, arguing, demanding answers that would never come. Some called out for Princess Elena, wondering where their beloved future queen had gone. If only they knew she was right there among them. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. Elena reached the edge of the marketplace where her faithful servant, Margaret, waited with a simple wooden cart and an old horse. Margaret had served Elena's family before the princess was even born. She was the closest thing to a mother Elena had ever known. "My dear child," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I am so sorry." Elena climbed into the cart without speaking. She could not trust her voice not to break. Margaret had packed her few belongings in 2 small bags. Everything else Elena had ever owned, every dress, every jewel, every gift from Alexander, remained in the palace. She wanted nothing that would remind her of the life she was leaving behind. As the cart rolled away from the Golden Palace, Elena looked back one final time. The massive towers reached toward the sky, like fingers grasping for something they could never touch. The windows that had been her world for 22 years now looked like empty eyes staring back at her. "Where will we go?" Margaret asked gently. "Anywhere but here," Elena replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They traveled in silence through the kingdom's winding roads. The countryside that had always seemed beautiful to Elena now felt strange and foreign. She knew every stone of the palace, every flower in the royal gardens, every portrait on the walls. But out here, beyond the palace gates, everything was unknown. As evening approached, they reached the village of Millbrook at the kingdom's border. It was a small place where farmers lived simple lives, far from the politics of the royal court. Margaret had a sister here, a kind woman named Rose, who ran a small inn for travelers. The inn was humble but clean. Rose welcomed them with warm bread and hot soup, asking no questions about why a mysterious young woman had arrived with so few possessions and such sad eyes. Elena ate very little, her stomach still twisted with grief. That night, Elena lay in a small room under the inn's slanted roof. Through the tiny window, she could see stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on black silk. These were the same stars she had watched with Alexander from the palace balcony. They had made wishes on shooting stars, planned their future under the moon's gentle light, dreamed of growing old together while gazing at the infinite heavens. Now, those stars felt like witnesses to her pain. 3 days passed in the quiet inn. Elena barely spoke and ate even less. She spent her time sitting by the window, watching ordinary people live their ordinary lives. She saw farmers leading their cattle to pasture, children playing in the dusty streets, women hanging laundry in the morning sun. Their lives seemed so simple, so free from the weight of duty and politics that had crushed her dreams. On the 4th morning, Rose knocked gently on Elena's door. "Child, there is someone here to see you." Elena's heart leaped with foolish hope. Had Alexander changed his mind? Had he found a way to break free from his arranged marriage? She rushed downstairs, her feet barely touching the wooden steps. But it was not Alexander waiting in the inn's main room. It was Princess Victoria herself. The northern princess was even more beautiful than Alina remembered. Her dark hair shone like polished ebony, and her blue eyes sparkled like sapphires. She wore a traveling dress of deep purple silk that made her look like royalty even in the humble inn. Everything about her spoke of wealth, power, and the political strength that Alina could never offer. Princess Alina, Victoria said, rising from her chair with perfect grace. I hoped I might find you here. Alina felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Here she stood in her simple peasant dress, her hair unbrushed, her face pale from crying. Next to Victoria's radiant beauty, she felt like a shadow. I did not expect to see you, Your Highness, Alina managed to say. Please, call me Victoria. We are both women caught in the same terrible situation. Alina blinked in surprise. I do not understand. Victoria gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. May we sit? I have traveled far to speak with you. Against her better judgment, Alina sat down across from the woman who would soon marry the man she loved. Victoria's presence filled the room like expensive perfume, making Alina feel even smaller and more insignificant. I know you think I am your enemy, Victoria began. I know you believe I have stolen your happiness. Alina said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. The truth is, Victoria continued, I never wanted this marriage either. Elena's eyes widened in shock. What? I have been in love with someone else for 3 years, Victoria said quietly. His name is Captain Marcus. He commands my father's naval fleet. He is brave and kind and makes me laugh until my sides hurt. We planned to marry this autumn. Alina stared at the other princess, hardly believing what she was hearing. Then why are you here? Why are you marrying Alexander? Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. For the same reason Prince Alexander agreed to marry me, because our fathers decided that love matters less than power, because armies and political alliances are more important than human hearts. The two young women sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their private grief. Does Alexander know? Alina asked finally. About Marcus? No. Just as I assume he has not told me the details of his love for you. Victoria paused. Though anyone with eyes can see how much he cares for you. At the state dinners where we met, he mentioned your name at least a dozen times each evening. Alina felt fresh tears sting her eyes. Even at formal events with his future bride, Alexander had been thinking of her. What will happen to your captain, Marcus? Alina asked. He will remain in my father's service. We will see each other at official functions and pretend we are nothing more than princess and soldier. Perhaps, in time, the pain will fade. Victoria's voice grew soft and sad. Or perhaps we will both grow old with broken hearts. Alina looked at this beautiful, powerful princess and saw something she had not expected to find. She saw herself, another woman forced to sacrifice love for duty, dreams for politics, happiness for the greater good. I am sorry, Alina said sincerely. I thought you were taking Alexander away from me by choice, and I thought you were the spoiled palace princess, who did not understand the real world's harsh demands. Victoria replied with a sad smile. We were both wrong. Victoria reached into her silk purse and pulled out a small velvet box. Alexander asked me to give this to you. Elena's hands trembled as she opened the box. Inside was the promise ring Alexander had given her on her 21st birthday. It was a simple band of gold with a small diamond that caught the morning light like a captured star. He wanted you to know that his feelings have not changed, Victoria said gently. Even though his actions must. Alina closed the box and held it against her heart. The ring felt warm, as if it still carried some of Alexander's love within its golden circle. 2 weeks had passed since Victoria's unexpected visit to the inn. Alina found herself thinking about the northern princess more often than she cared to admit. The woman she had expected to hate had shown her nothing but kindness and understanding. They were both prisoners of the same cruel fate. Separated by kingdoms but united by heartbreak. Alina had decided to stay in Millbrook for now. Rose had offered her work at the inn, and Alina found comfort in the simple tasks of cooking, cleaning, and serving travelers. Her hands, once soft from a life of luxury, were now roughened by honest work. But there was peace in the routine, a blessed numbness that helped quiet the constant ache in her chest. On this particular morning, Alina was sweeping the inn's front steps when she heard the thunder of approaching horses. A royal messenger rode into the village square, his mount's hooves kicking up clouds of dust. The man wore the golden colors of Alexander's kingdom, and Elena's heart began to race. Hear the royal announcement. The messenger called out in the voice that carried across the entire village. Prince Alexander of the Golden Kingdom will wed Princess Victoria of the Northern Kingdom in 3 days' time. All citizens are invited to witness the ceremony from the palace courtyard. The words hit Alina like physical blows. 3 days, just 3 days. Alexander would promise himself to another woman forever. She dropped the broom and pressed her hand against the doorframe to steady herself. Rose appeared beside her, concern written across her kind face. Child, you've gone pale as fresh snow. Alina could not find her voice to respond. 3 days felt both like an eternity and no time at all. Part of her had been hoping that something would change, that some miracle would prevent the marriage. But now the date was set, the announcement made public, there would be no escape for any of them. That evening, as Alina served dinner to the inn's guests, she overheard their conversations about the upcoming royal wedding. Some travelers spoke with excitement about the grand celebration, others worried about what the marriage would mean for trade between the kingdoms. A few mentioned Princess Elena with sadness, wondering what had become of the beloved royal who had simply disappeared. "Such a shame about the princess," said an elderly merchant. "They say she loved Prince Alexander with all her heart." "Love, don't put food on the table or stop armies from marching," replied his companion. The prince did what he had to do. Elena kept her head down as she cleared their plates, but their words echoed in her mind long after the guests had retired too. Their rooms. The next morning brought another surprise visitor. Elena was in the inn's small garden, hanging wet linens on the clothesline, when Margaret came running outside with tears in her eyes. "My lady," Margaret whispered urgently, "Princess Sophia is here. She's asking for you." Elena's heart leaped. Sophia was Alexander's younger sister, the girl Elena had helped raise and who called her sister. Elena had not seen her since the terrible day at the palace. She found Sophia waiting in the inn's main room, still wearing her traveling cloak. The 16-year-old princess looked older somehow, as if the weight of recent events had aged her beyond her years. When she saw Elena, she burst into tears and ran into her arms. "Elena," Sophia sobbed, "I've missed you so much." Elena held the girl tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of the rose oil Sophia always wore. "My sweet Sophia, what are you doing here?" "I had to see you," Sophia said, pulling back to look at Elena's face. "I could not bear the thought of Alexander's wedding happening without you knowing how much we all miss you." Elena led Sophia to the chairs by the fireplace, the same place where she had spoken with Victoria just 2 weeks before. "How is he?" Elena asked, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. Sophia's young face crumpled with grief. "He's terrible, Elena. He barely eats, barely sleeps. He goes through the motions of wedding preparations like a man walking to his own execution. Yesterday, I found him in the rose garden where you used to walk together. He was just standing there, staring at the flowers with such sadness in his eyes." Elena closed her eyes, imagining Alexander alone among the roses they had planted together. "And Princess Victoria? She's kind enough," Sophia said. "But there's no joy in her either. She and Alexander speak to each other with perfect politeness, but there's no warmth between them. It's like watching two strangers performing parts in a play." Elena thought of Victoria's confession about Captain Marcus and felt a stab of sympathy for both the bride and groom who would soon be trapped in a loveless marriage. "There's something else," Sophia said quietly. "Something I think you should know." Elena waited, her heart pounding. "Father received another message from the Northern Kingdom yesterday. The king is not satisfied with just the marriage alliance. He's demanding that Alexander sign over control of our southern ports as well, and he wants half our army to join his forces for a campaign against the eastern kingdoms." Elena felt her blood turn cold. "That would leave your kingdom defenseless." "Exactly," Sophia said. "Father is beside himself with worry. He agreed to the marriage to prevent war, but now it seems the Northern King wants to swallow our entire kingdom piece by piece." Elena stood and began pacing around the small room. "Does Alexander know about these new demands?" "Not yet. Father plans to tell him after the wedding. He's afraid that if Alexander knows the truth now, he might refuse to go through with the ceremony." Elena's mind raced with this new information. The marriage that was supposed to save Alexander's kingdom might actually destroy it. But what could she do? She was powerless, a princess without a crown, a woman without a kingdom. "There's more," Sophia continued. "I've been asking questions, listening to conversations I probably shouldn't hear. Some of the palace guards think the Northern King never intended to honor the peace treaty. They believe he's been planning to invade us all along, marriage or no marriage." Elena sank back into a chair, overwhelmed by the enormity of what Sophia was telling her. "If that's true, then Alexander is sacrificing his happiness for nothing." "That's what I'm afraid of," Sophia said. "And there's no one he trusts enough to tell him the truth. Father is too proud to admit he might have made a mistake. The council members are too frightened of the Northern King to speak up." Elena looked at this brave young woman who had risked everything to bring her this information. "Why are you telling me this, Sophia?" "Because you're the only person Alexander has ever truly trusted," Sophia said simply. "Because even though you're not his bride, you're still the woman he loves. And because I think you might be the only one who can save him." Elena shook her head. "I have no power here. I'm nothing but an orphaned princess hiding in a village in UF. Something more powerful than armies or gold," Sophia said, gripping Elena's hands. "You have his heart. He would listen to you if you warned him about what's really happening." Elena pulled her hands free and walked to the window. Outside she could see the simple villagers going about their daily tasks, unaware that their kingdom's fate hung in the balance. These people trusted their prince to protect them. They believed in him just as she once had. "The wedding is tomorrow," Elena said finally. "Even if I wanted to help, there's no time." "There's always time to fight for what's right," Sophia said fiercely. My brother taught me that. Alina turned back to look at the young princess. In Sophia's determined eyes, she saw an echo of Alexander's courage and honor, the same qualities that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. What exactly are you asking me to do? Elena asked. Sophia stood and moved to Elena's side. Come back with me. Warn Alexander about what his marriage will really cost. Help him find another way to protect our people. Elena's heart pounded with fear and hope in equal measure. Going back meant facing Alexander again, seeing him on the eve of his wedding to another woman. It meant risking everything for a chance that might not even exist. The Golden Palace had never looked more beautiful or more terrifying to Alina. As Sophia's carriage rolled through the main gates in the early hours before dawn, Alina felt her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. She had agreed to return, but now that she was here, every instinct told her to run. The palace gardens were decorated with thousands of white roses and golden ribbons for the wedding that would take place in just a few hours. Servants hurried back and forth, making final preparations for what should have been the most joyful day in the kingdom's history. Instead, Alina felt like she was arriving at a funeral. Sophia had smuggled Alina into the palace through the old servants' entrance, the same path Alina had used to escape weeks ago. Now she found herself hiding in Sophia's chambers, listening to the sounds of wedding preparations echoing through the halls. I still cannot believe I am here, Alina whispered, pacing nervously around the familiar room where she had spent countless hours with Sophia over the years. You had to come, Sophia said firmly. Alexander needs to know the truth before he makes the biggest mistake of his life. Through the window, Alina could see workers setting up chairs in the courtyard for the wedding guests. A raised platform had been built where Alexander and Victoria would exchange vows in front of thousands of people. The sight made Elena's stomach twist with a mixture of grief and determination. When will you tell him I am here? Alina asked. As soon as he wakes. He always takes a morning walk in the rose garden before important events. It helps him think clearly. Sophia paused. But Alina, you must be prepared. He might be angry that you came back. He might think you were trying to make things harder for him. Alina nodded, though her heart felt heavy with doubt. What if Alexander did not want to see her? What if her presence only caused him more pain? But then she remembered Sophia's words about the Northern King's true intentions, and she knew she had to try. An hour later, Sophia returned with news that Alexander was indeed walking in the gardens. He looks terrible, she reported sadly, like he has not slept in days. Go to him, Alina. He needs you now more than ever. Alina wrapped her old brown cloak around her shoulders and made her way through the palace corridors she knew by heart. Every portrait on the walls, every carved detail in the marble columns, every familiar scent brought back memories of the life she had lost. But she pushed aside her personal grief and focused on her mission. The rose garden was exactly as she remembered it. The morning sun cast long shadows between the carefully tended bushes, and the air was sweet with the perfume of blooming flowers. Alina found Alexander sitting on the stone bench where they had shared so many precious moments together. He looked older, as if the weight of his responsibilities had aged him years in just a few weeks. His usually bright eyes were dull with exhaustion, and his shoulders sagged with a burden too heavy for any one person to carry. Alexander, she said softly. He looked up sharply, and for a moment his face showed such joy that Elena's heart nearly broke all over again. Then reality crashed back down on him, and his expression hardened into a mask of painful control. Alina, he said, standing slowly. What are you doing here? I had to come, she said, moving closer but stopping when she saw him tense. Sophia told me about the Northern King's new demands. Alexander's face went pale. She should not have told you that. Someone had to, Alina said firmly. You are about to sign away your kingdom's independence for a marriage that will not even bring the peace you hoped for. You do not understand the situation, Alexander said, but his voice lacked conviction. I understand that you are being deceived, Alina replied. The Northern King never intended to honor any peace treaty. He wants to swallow your kingdom piece by piece. Starting with this marriage, Alexander turned away from her, staring at the roses as if they held answers to impossible questions. Even if that is true, what choice do I have? His army is still 3 times larger than ours. If I refuse the marriage now, he will attack immediately. Alina moved to stand beside him, close enough to smell the familiar scent of his skin, but careful not to touch him. There might be another way. What other way? Alexander asked bitterly. Do you have a magical army hidden somewhere? Can you make soldiers appear from thin air? Alina took a deep breath. What if the marriage went forward, but with different terms? What if Victoria could be convinced to stand against her father? Alexander looked at her as if she had lost her mind. Why would she do that? She is his daughter. Her loyalty is to the Northern Kingdom because she is in love with someone else, Alina said quietly. Just as you are. Because she is being forced into this marriage against her will, just as you are. Alexander stared at her in shock. What are you talking about? Alina quickly told him about Victoria's visit to the inn, about Captain Marcus, about the Northern Princess's confession that she was as trapped as they were. As she spoke, she watched understanding dawn on Alexander's face. She came to see you, he asked in amazement. She wanted me to know that she was not my enemy, Elena explained. We are all victims of the same cruel politics. Alexander sat back down on the bench, his head in his hands. Even if Victoria would help us, what could we do? Her father controls the army. Elena sat beside him, her heart aching at being so close to the man she loved. Captain Marcus commands the naval fleet. If Victoria could convince him to side with us, we would have ships and experienced sailors. Combined with your army and the support of your allies, it might be enough to make the Northern King think twice about invasion. That is a dangerous gamble, Alexander said. If we are wrong, if Marcus refuses to help, or if Victoria betrays us to her father, then we would face an even worse fate. Sometimes the greatest courage is found in taking the greatest risks, Elena said, repeating words Alexander himself had spoken to her years ago. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw some of the old warmth return to his eyes. Why are you doing this, Elena? Why are you trying to help me when I have caused you so much pain? Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. Because I love you. Because I love this kingdom and its people. Because sometimes love means fighting for what is right, even when it hurts. Alexander reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. If this plan worked, if we could somehow defeat the Northern King's threats, I would still be married to Victoria. We still could not be together. Elena nodded, her heart breaking all over again. I know, but at least you would be free to rule your kingdom as you see fit. At least your people would be safe. And maybe, in time, you and Victoria could find some happiness together, even if it is not the passionate love we shared. They sat in silence for a long moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Around them, the roses bloomed in perfect beauty, unaware of the human drama playing out beneath their petals. The wedding is in 3 hours, Alexander said finally. Even if Victoria agreed to this plan, there would be no time to contact Captain Marcus or coordinate with our allies. Elena felt her last hope beginning to fade. Then what will you do? Alexander stood and looked toward the palace where his bride was preparing for their wedding. I will do what I have always done. I will protect my people, no matter the cost to myself. As he walked away, Elena felt the weight of failure crushing down on her. She had come back to save the man she loved, but it seemed she was too late. In just a few hours, Alexander would marry Victoria, and both their fates would be sealed forever. Elena remained in the rose garden long after Alexander had gone, her mind racing with desperate thoughts. The wedding bells would ring in less than 2 hours, and she felt helpless to change the course of events that would destroy everything she held dear. But as she sat among the flowers that had witnessed so many of her happy moments with Alexander, a new idea began to form in her mind. If Alexander would not take the risk of speaking to Victoria, then Elena would have to do it herself. She made her way back to the palace through the servant corridors, avoiding the main halls where wedding preparations were in full swing. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs to the guest wing where Victoria was staying. What if the Northern Princess refused to see her? What if guards prevented her from even reaching Victoria's chambers? But fate seemed to be on Elena's side. As she approached Victoria's door, she saw that the hallway was empty except for one young maid carrying fresh linens. "Excuse-me," Elena said softly, pulling back her hood. "I need to speak with Princess Victoria. It is urgent." The maid's eyes widened in recognition. Everyone in the palace knew Princess Elena's face, even though she had been gone for weeks. "Your Highness, I do not know if... Please," Elena said. "Tell her that Elena needs to speak with her about Captain Marcus." The maid nodded quickly, and disappeared into Victoria's chambers. A few moments later she returned and motioned for Elena to enter. Victoria stood by the tall windows of her room, still wearing her silk dressing gown. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders and her face was pale despite the careful application of powder and rouge. She looked like a beautiful doll prepared for display rather than a bride ready for her wedding day. "Elena," Victoria said with surprise, "I did not expect to see you here today." "I had to come," Elena said, closing the door behind her. "There are things you need to know before you marry Alexander." Victoria gestured to the chairs near the fireplace, and both women sat down. Around them, Victoria's wedding dress hung from a wooden stand like a white ghost. The gown was magnificent, covered in pearls and silver thread that caught the morning light like captured stars. "You look troubled," Victoria observed. "More troubled than a woman should be on someone else's wedding day." Elena took a deep breath. "Your father is planning to betray the peace treaty. He intends to use this marriage to weaken Alexander's kingdom and then invade anyway." Victoria's face went very still. "How do you know this?" Elena quickly explained what Sophia had told her about the Northern King's new demands, about the plans to take control of the southern ports and split Alexander's army. As she spoke, she watched Victoria's expression change from surprise to anger to something that looked almost like relief. "I am not surprised," Victoria said finally. "My father, who has never been satisfied with what he has, he always wants more land, more power, more control over other people's lives than you believe me." "I have suspected something like this for weeks," Victoria admitted. The way he spoke about this marriage, the way he smiled when he thought no one was looking. He was too pleased with himself for a man who was simply preventing a war. Elena leaned forward in her chair. Then you understand why this marriage cannot happen as planned. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring at her wedding dress with an expression Elena could not read. What exactly are you asking me to do? Run away on my wedding day? Refuse to marry Alexander and start a war immediately? No, Elena said. I am asking you to marry him, but as his ally rather than his father's spy. I am asking you to help us find a way to protect both kingdoms from your father's ambitions. And how would we do that? Elena's heart raced as she spoke the words that could change everything. Captain Marcus commands your father's naval fleet. If you could convince him to bring his ships over to our side, combined with Alexander's army, and support from allied kingdoms, we might have enough strength to make your father reconsider his plans. Victoria's eyes widened. You want me to ask Marcus to commit treason against my father? I want you to ask him to choose between loyalty to a tyrant and loyalty to the woman he loves. Elena said gently. Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard where hundreds of people were already gathering for the ceremony. Marcus would do anything for me, she said softly. But if we are wrong, if this plan fails, he could be executed for treason. We all could. And if we do nothing, Elena replied, your father will eventually destroy both kingdoms anyway. At least this way we have a chance to fight back. Victoria turned from the window to face Elena. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping the man you love marry another woman? Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. Because love is not always about getting what you want. Sometimes love means sacrificing your own happiness to protect the people you care about, even if it means watching Alexander marry me. Even then, Elena whispered. Victoria studied Elena's face for a long moment. You truly love him, do not you? Not just the idea of being queen, not just the romance of a fairy tale, but the man himself. With all my heart, Elena said simply. And I truly love Marcus, Victoria said. Not just because he is handsome or brave, but because he makes me laugh, and challenges me to be better than I am. The two women looked at each other, understanding passing between them like a bridge built of shared pain and hope. If we do this, Victoria said slowly, if we convince Marcus to help us, what happens after? Assuming we succeed in stopping my father, what becomes of all of us? Elena had been dreading this question, but she knew she had to be honest. You and Alexander would remain married. You would rule this kingdom together and hopefully find some happiness in friendship and shared purpose. Marcus would be welcomed here as a hero and given a place of honor in your court. And you, Elena's heart clenched. I would leave again. I could not stay and watch you build a life with the man I love, even knowing it was the right thing to do. Victoria moved to stand in front of Elena. That seems terribly unfair. Many things in life are unfair, Elena said. But that does not mean we stop fighting for what is right. Victoria was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Outside, they could hear the sound of musicians tuning their instruments and the chatter of excited guests. The wedding was supposed to begin in less than an hour. How would we contact Marcus? Victoria asked finally. Does he have any men here? Anyone who could carry a message? Elena felt a surge of hope. Victoria was considering the plan. Does he have any men here? Anyone who could carry a message? Yes, Victoria said, her voice growing stronger with decision. Lieutenant Hayes is here as part of my escort. He is one of Marcus's most trusted officers and completely loyal to him. Could you trust him with this secret? Victoria nodded. Hayes has served with Marcus for 10 years. If I explained the situation, he would help us. Elena stood, her heart pounding with excitement and terror. Then we still have time. The wedding can proceed as planned, but instead of binding you to your father's schemes, it will be the beginning of our resistance against him. Victoria walked to her dressing table and picked up a piece of paper and a pen. I will write to Marcus immediately. Hayes can leave during the ceremony when everyone is distracted. As Victoria began to write, Elena felt a mixture of hope and heartbreak washing over her. They might actually save Alexander's kingdom, but the price would be watching him marry another woman and then leaving forever. Elena, Victoria said without looking up from her letter, when this is all over, when we have defeated my father and secured peace for both kingdoms, I want you to know that you will always have a place here if you choose to stay. Elena shook her head. I cannot. Not as Alexander's love, Victoria continued, but as my friend, as someone who helped save us all when no one else could.